Welcome, everybody. As you join the Zoom room, we welcome you to episode 7 of Navigating Now, our virtual roundtable series. As you all join, welcome. We'll begin in just about a minute. Thank you for joining. Welcome, everybody, as you join the Zoom webinar room. And we also welcome those who are joining us from LinkedIn. This is episode 7 of the Navigating Now weekly virtual roundtable series. We will begin in just a few seconds. Thanks for joining us. All right, we are going to get started. We want to welcome everybody to episode 7 of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. We are absolutely thrilled to bring you yet another important topic in today's leadership. And we have another incredible cast of panelists to lead the discussion. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. We will begin momentarily. This webinar starts at 3 o'clock sharp every Thursday. That's Central Time, every Thursday here in our Zoom webinar room, as well as live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We typically go about 30-35 minutes so that we can field and answer any questions that you all have as you're joining, as you're listening to our panelists, or maybe you've got some thoughts or some comments. We encourage you to drop those in the chat box if you are in the Zoom room, or if you're joining us from LinkedIn, feel free to drop a question or a comment in the comments dialog box. We will reserve about 10 or 15 minutes towards the end to answer questions, and that could be for individual panelists or the group at large. So before we get into it, I really would like to introduce our guest panelists today. We've got an incredible set of leaders from multiple industries, and we will start first with our first panelist, Lindsey Verstegen. She is the Chief People Officer at ShopRunner. They are a Chicago-based tech company. Thanks for joining us, Lindsey.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Mark Bradley. He is the HR Transformation Lead at EY People Advisory Services. They are a Big Four consulting company, and Mark is based here in Chicago as well. Thanks so much for joining, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, we have Jen Turner. She's the Executive Director of Global HR at CSG. They are a global software company. Jen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Anthony.
All right, so today we're talking about leading people through uncertainty and change. And we know that this is a topic at the forefront of all of our minds as leaders. As we navigate these changing times, oftentimes the people and the livelihoods, as well as the success of our people, are at the forefront of our mind. And we thought we would invite these HR executives and specialists to the table to help us unpack this topic and talk a little bit about how they're approaching their workforce and enriching and supporting their people. So I'd like to start the conversation off by handing it over to our facilitator, as always, Kathy Ock. She's a partner here at Thoughtium. Kathy is going to lead us in discussion. Thanks so much, Kathy.
Thanks, Anthony. It is so exciting to have all of our panelists here today, and we have an amazing topic thinking about and just diving deeper into how we can lead people through these challenging times. We'd like to just start by asking each of our panelists to say a little bit more about your leadership role today in the organization that you represent, and maybe also just to share one piece of good news. Given the extent to which our environment has changed and been upended over the last couple of months, we are always looking forward to getting good news. So maybe you could share something from that perspective as well. Mark, why don't we start with you?
Great. Thanks, Kathy. So my role at EY, I'm the HR transformation lead here in the central region. As you guys mentioned, Chicago's home. And what that means is that I'm a consultant, right? EY is a Big Four consultancy, and I spend my days working with organizations to help them really reimagine and reinvent how they deliver the people mission of their business. I don't think there's ever been a better time to be in that space. The people agenda is is the agenda of business. And it's just a really fun space to be in right now. Good news for me is super simple. I think my son might actually get a baseball season this summer. We got some early word that they might start practices in June with some small groups and some games in July. And one of the crazy things about this whole slowdown and shelter in place is that the activities of all three of my kids have come to a grinding halt. So they need it, we need it. I'm really looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, Lindsey, how about you?
Sure. My name is Lindsey, and I run HR at ShopRunner, which is, as Anthony said, a tech company in Chicago. And my role has evolved. I've come from all high growth companies, growth stage, startup stage companies. So it's super different than EY. So hopefully between our perspectives, it'll be really interesting. And my role is really to help be the person who's the culture warrior, champion, whatever you want to call it, to really sort of like, what do we build? What are the words we use together? And how do we navigate everything we will build together and scale it? So when I started a few years back, we were only about 60 employees and we were not Chicago headquartered. And in 3 years' time, we now have 230 employees total, with Chicago as the headquarters with about 130 people there. So it really has been a story of scale and really transforming and refounding ShopRunner, which has been around over a decade. And so now my journey is really, as part of the executive team, navigating not only the product decisions we're going to make as we continue to build things, and retail is certainly very interesting right now, always has been, and now is exceedingly interesting. And so my role will be continuing to help sort of guide and provide the frameworks needed to continue to navigate it.
Wonderful.
My piece of good news is that my favorite bakery, Hune, which is here in Evanston, just moved 2 blocks from my house, which means it's the perfect time for me to have that kind of access to my baked goods because I can walk there. There's curbside pickup, and it is amazing.
That's exciting. Thank you. Okay, great. Jen, how about you?
Hi, I'm Jen Turner, and I am one of the executive directors on the HR business partner team at CSG, which is a global software company. And I'm based here in Chicago. I did join the organization in October of last year, so relatively new. And in my role, I look after the tech and product organization, and then I also have a few of our shared services functions, facilities, workplace, finance, and HR. So that's a really interesting mix. And it's a blend of team development strategy and figuring out how to optimize the employee experience and our culture. Lindsey just talked about that, and I totally agree. That's a huge part of our role and so critical, especially now, in maintaining that strong sense of culture and really being ambassadors for that in the organization. My bit of good news is actually that, since joining the organization in October, I have been able to really get to know and work with some amazing colleagues. I mean, my team, our CHRO, the people I work with every day in our function inspire and impress me, and it's been wonderful to get to know them. And I feel like the connection, even in this context, has been really strong, because I think and we'll talk more about this, but we've, I think, been really deliberate about staying connected, and I'm just so grateful to work with such a great group of professionals. So that's my bit of good news.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, this is going to be a really interesting and hopefully a lively conversation, because I know we've all had so many experiences over the last several months, especially. Not that we don't have challenges in leading people every single day, but the environment has changed so dramatically, and we've seen so many things happen that have upended the patterns that we had, and there have been so many shifts that we've had to make. So that's where we're going to jump in today. And Lindsey, maybe we'll have you lead us off. If you can tell us a little bit about how you've experienced this pandemic, what the impact has been, what the felt impact has been for you, and how you have maybe shifted in the way you've been leading people through the change and uncertainty associated with that.
Yeah, I think the big observation I've had is that any place you feel strong culturally will become stronger, and anything where you felt maybe there was some weakness, you're going to see it and you're going to have to address it really quickly. So I think the way we've changed in our leadership is sort of to the same extent. We've turned up the volume on leading with humanity. So I think in particular, that's important no matter what you're building. But I think especially when there is something that has taken us all down on the hierarchy of needs, to just a place of needing to feel safe and heard. I think, my CEO, Sam Yegan, runs the Shop Runner, and he and I have worked in partnership with the rest of the executive team to really show vulnerability, to assert what we know, what we don't know, to have a high amount of transparency without being reckless, and just letting people into the logic that will go into the decisions we will make week to week. So we made a lot of decisions really quickly as it related to sort of battening down the hatches and ensuring our business would survive. And that was not easy because there wasn't a lot of data to point at exactly where it was all headed. But as long as we had that transparency and that relationship with our employees and this sort of heart forward status and stance, I think it went a long way with employees who, we all feel freaked out by what's happening right now. And I think acknowledging that and not imagining there's some sort of secret playbook somewhere that someone's going to hand down at some point, but rather just saying, hey, we're going to do the next right thing. And then after that, the next right thing. Taking it step by step and sort of peeling back the curtain on the logic to get from one decision to the next. So I think it's not a new leadership approach. It certainly has made us want to connect even more on the human level than ever before, and really sort of lean into that as the core principle in every decision we make.
I love what you said about how it makes even more visible the strengths as well as the weaknesses, and really puts the urgency behind addressing the weaknesses. You talked about the support that you provide to the retail industry, and given all of those changes, I'm just wondering how that has shown up in the leadership role that you play.
Yeah, I think it has taken an already tumultuous landscape and made it more tumultuous, but it has made the stakes higher on what we're hoping to achieve, which is a world where we don't all buy things from Amazon only, and we really want a diverse landscape of retailers. I think because we are in fight or flight as a species at this moment, it could be very easy to put all of our eggs in the Amazon basket. There's convenience, they have oodles of resources, but I don't think anyone wants to live in a world where they and Walmart are the only option. So it's interesting. It's making it a Goliath level challenge, but it means we're even more convicted in the fact that it needs to exist. And that if we really pay attention to how we might arm our retailers with the tools they need, and some of our retailers started as brick and mortar. And so it really becomes, how do they have a more omni-channel approach? How do they have the ability to be more agile in whatever comes, pandemic or not? And those are the tools we are building for them. And then in the meantime, connecting with our members and ensuring they can get what they need in the same way Amazon is up the ante for customer expectation. And so how do we continue to find the right balance between the two? So I think it's really more bringing a data mindset to retailers who historically haven't had that agility on their e-commerce presence, because we don't dabble much at all in the brick and mortar space, but rather their e-commerce tools. So it certainly has made an interesting landscape even more interesting. And our hope is that we build the tools so that this will not be the last change we see, and that those retailers feel they have a fair fight ahead of them.
Yeah, wonderful. That's so fascinating. Great. I'm sure we'll circle back to that. Thank you so much. Mark, how about you in your role as the head of transformation? And I know you're interacting with people all the time as we are. What have you seen truly transform over the course of the last several months, and how has that affected your role as a leader?
Yeah, I think I actually want to address one of Lindsey's points, Kathy, before I hit that. Lindsey, I love the notion of it's going to, amplify the good and the bad. We've kind of used the analogy of that this crisis is going to become a magnifying glass. And so those things that were already there and great, you're going to see them show up better. And the things that might have been risk areas and issues are also going to show up more and more prominently. So having to kind of tackle those fast, we've seen that in spades. So totally agree with that. Kathy, to kind of give I think the challenge of doing this in the time box we have is that the challenge list is longer than we could ever cover, right? So kind of making sure we're brief and concise, and that kind of I'll bring this from the perspective of two hats. I consult two organizations about their people strategies, and I'm a people leader inside the company. And so bear with me if I vacillate between those two roles. But at EY, I think we really got out front of a lot of this to make sure our people were safe and secure. But to do that, it upended our business very quickly. I wasn't with my teams physically like I am usually. My teams and I, we weren't out with our clients like we are usually. And so while we're pretty adept at virtual work, to go to this extreme was pretty jarring. To put some numbers behind it, this blew my mind when I got these numbers. We averaged 2.5 million meetings per week as a firm, 60% of which were done in person prior to pandemic. And the number of meetings didn't reduce, but by April 1st, we were at 0% in person and 70% of those meetings were run over Microsoft Teams. So if you just think about everything it took to do that, the technology infrastructure, just the iron will of people, not just our people, but our clients to kind of pivot with us, that took a lot. And for some of my teams, I think it was kind of especially hard. We were in the middle of some multi-year technology-enabled transformation programs. And so a lot of spotlight on those to say, what do we do? Do we forge on? Do we continue with these programs? And so this is kind of the ultimate, where there's a will, there's a way. We didn't have a playbook. We had to figure stuff out as we went and kind of navigate from the gut. But I would say over the course of 10 weeks, we've gone from, being put on our ear to feeling like a lot of our work is just very well run, under control, and that we've found the virtual replica of what we used to know as the in-person norms. But I think a lot of this, I think the question had its roots in me as a people leader. And so how do I be present as a people leader in a virtual environment? That's different. How am I attentive? How do I provide guidance, feedback, support? How do I inspire? All of those things change in this environment. And so, I think we're still figuring a lot of that out, but I would say over the course of 10 weeks, we've made a really fast pivot and just proud of what we've done as a firm and what our clients have done to really be able to keep things moving along while having a once in a generation curveball thrown at you.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark,
Wonderful.
I've got a quick follow-up question for you. How have your clients responded to this new virtual first environment? How has the way that you've worked with your clients maybe changed over the course of the last 8 weeks?
It's a great question. I think a lot of that starts with how their business was impacted. We serve clients across a wide spectrum. So if you take airlines and cruise lines and their businesses were dramatically impacted. And so they had to really batten down the hatches and focus on just the bare minimum things to survive, which would pause a lot of the work that they might be doing project-wise with consultancies or otherwise. And yet I've got clients who, one of my clients is a food manufacturer, which we could go around the horn. I guarantee their products are on your shelves at home. That they had record demand for staple food goods. And so I think part of it was we had to follow their lead. Right? Are they pushing the gas pedal down to respond to market demand? Or are they going into crisis mode in kind of that flight or fight? Are we going to survive? But then I think we all got through that really quickly. And no matter where they were at on that spectrum, folks really pivoted to this virtual environment in a pretty inspiring way. I saw a lot of empathy and understanding. And I'll give an anecdote. One of these projects that I was mentioning, we're at a critical stage. We got on a Zoom meeting, not unlike this one, and we had the CEO of the client come to the meeting to thank the team for all the good work they were doing. And in the middle of that, it's the CEO, we got him for 3 minutes. We were thrilled about that. 1 minute in, his dog barges through the office and hops up into his lap. And he rolled with it, put the dog on Zoom, waved the dog's paw, was very real and led by example and showed his people, our people, everyone that we're all living through this together and we're going to have to figure some stuff out along the way. So I'm just really inspired by what I've seen out of our people and our clients in that way.
That's great. Thanks.
Wonderful. Okay. Jen, we'd love to have you come into the conversation. I know your world has been equally as crazy, and we'd love to hear your perspective on where have you shifted? What has that been like for you as a people leader?
So there have been so many great points already made. I really like what Lindsey said about not having a playbook. And as long as we continue to lead as our authentic selves, following our own values, but I'm fortunate to work for an organization where our company values are so strong and they're not just words on the wall or on a page. And leading with those values has created this very transparent form of communication that has resonated with our local teams. And I'll give an example. Right after we were asked to work remotely, I actually had a team meeting at 10 o'clock at night here in Chicago so that everyone on my team could join. And I was very deliberate about making it a little bit of a longer meeting. So for those of us here, it was super late, but we started with something fun. And so we all wore spirit wear, but we had to explain why we wore our spirit wear. And, you know, our team in Australia that's near the Barrier Reef, they brought, you know, a mask and a snorkel just to kind of to make it really fun. But then we pivoted into some strategy work that I had just completed globally, and we were kind of trying to bring it to the finish line. So it was a really nice mix. And I think blending the fun with the focus makes people feel engaged and like they're making an impact. And I do love what Mark said about the random visitors. So it's being open to the notion that a cat might just start crawling behind someone and laughing about it, because everyone's in this together, and that sense of community is something I absolutely feel has changed in a really positive way beyond the workplace, but certainly something that we are tending to and growing, right? Because it's so important. And I think it is really important to have a high degree of grace, you know, toward others right now. And I know there are team members who have really complicated lives now that they didn't have before, or more complicated. And it's saying, take the time that you need, right? In the middle of the day, it doesn't, as long as you feel like you are able to be productive in the context that you can, keeping that line of communication open is really important. And so there's this notion of global communication, and the way that our organization has handled that has been extraordinary, but it's also taking it into your own accountability to say, what am I doing with my team every day to keep those lines of communication transparent, authentic, and really open? And so listening and empathizing has become really critical in all of this, for sure.
Wow, so many great points. You know, we often see in organizations, and we've been involved in change processes, all of us, for so long. Oftentimes in organizations, they flow through the organization as a cascade. And I think one of the things we've seen in this experience that we've all been in, it's like we're standing in an enormous circle with everybody going through this at the same time. And you've all mentioned some wonderful things about that and the opportunities that it creates. We're also curious about the way that that maybe has challenged you, and a struggle or two that you've had, and how you've tried to work through that. Because, of course, we're trying to go through this change. At the same time, we're trying to lead other people through it, not only inside our organizations, but also with our customers and our clients. So that's a lot that we all have to manage at one time, and we're interested in where you've had a struggle or two and how you have worked through that. So, Mark, maybe we'll start with you, and then we can loop back around.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Similar to my previous comments, the list here is really long, but we'll focus at the top of it. I think the thing I've struggled with the most and tried to make sure I'm being attentive to as a people leader is this notion of uncertainty. You know, it's interesting. A good percentage of our EY workforce has never lived professionally through a crisis environment. So whether it was the great financial crisis or 9/11 or take your pick, a good percentage of our professional staff, they may have lived through those, but they didn't live through it as a professional with bills and paycheck and student debt. And so going through those levels of uncertainty about their day-to-day job and their client work, and then a little more personally, my career, my job, my paycheck, my livelihood, those are really hard personal things. And so I think understanding where everybody's coming from on those points really is important. And so a lot of, Jen, the authentic leadership, being empathetic, having strong culture values, all of those things, super important. I would say, you know, as a firm, I was given some pretty good tools to work with, and then I had to figure out what to do with them. So, you know, big picture, I think we came out pretty fast and made some bold moves. As a firm, we said we were pausing all separations through.
Oh no, his internet.
Uh-oh.
I can pick up for Mark while we wait for his
Thanks,
tethering to kick back. Yeah. Yeah, I think what has been a challenge, but one that easier said than done, is to admit when you're struggling and to just level. Again, regardless of role, we're people navigating it together. And so, like I said, not to do so to the point where you are sending someone's cortisol levels through the roof. They don't, they just feel stressed out because they're like, oh gosh, she's freaked out. And I often say, especially for HR, I think they look to us as like the flight attendants on the turbulent flight. Like, is she freaked out? Okay, she seems cool. We're good. And so I take that responsibility seriously, and I don't BS anybody. But I also will be totally candid and totally upfront. I took a mental health day probably week 8 into this, and I didn't dodge it. I didn't pretend it was anything other than I need a minute. And even if I'm going to be with my 2 young kids all day, it's certainly like I'm not going to be hanging out and watching a lot of shows, which God bless the people that can do that. That sounds awesome. But just the idea that I would give myself a pressure release valve, and that I would be open about it with people to give them the permission to do the same. And I think again, like, the authenticity is real, and also challenging this idea of to be authoritative means to not have any sort of vulnerability or weakness or uncertainty. We all are navigating that. It's a matter of, but these are the things that I can promise you. And for me, what I say is, what I can promise you is I will always be direct with you. We always will lead with a human forward lens. We will never do anything that we won't be able to look someone in the eye about and explain the rationale for the decision. And so making the commitments on the things you can control, just how you show up, and really putting words to it, just allows for a little less mental noise, I think, for people. And we're dealing with so much just sort of internal dialogue as we're, surveying the landscape for what's next. And I think to just name the things that are scary, name them, acknowledge them, say that they are there, and then talk about the ways that you're thinking through it. Again, also because hopefully we're working with leaders of tomorrow who will say that's possible. That's what leadership can look like. It doesn't have to be big and scary and all-knowing. It can be people who are really smart, who are putting their minds toward really hard problems and care deeply about the people who work for them and with them. And so I think just naming the things you can commit to as a leader, aside from where you're working, aside from what you're navigating, sort of your own personal values can go a long way to establishing an ongoing trust and just an understanding of the rules of the road, and also challenging assumptions that maybe things that when we're in the office can go unspoken. It's just an assumption. We see each other every day. Well, now we have to use far more intention behind the words and the ways we're going to show up for one another to make it the norm, So if you see something, say something. If I've said something that is against one of the principles I've flagged, call me on it and tell me that I failed to show up on it, because I have to get much more clean about communicating. It can't be that I see you in the hall and it happens and I have to think, okay, what's the level of communication that needs to happen at this point? So again, it's like you just have to bring more rigor, I think, and intention behind everything you're doing. And I think asserting the things you do know for sure can be really helpful in so much uncertainty, as Mark was talking about. It's totally true, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I love your point about intention. And I think, as you're saying, when we're able to step into it and name it and explain that we're in struggle too, because we're all going through it with him, I think it puts leaders into that context and makes it feel much more like we, versus having the separation between management and the rest of the team, which can sometimes happen during the change process. So I think that's a really interesting point. And I thank you for picking up where Mark left off. Mark, we lost you mid-sentence.
Welcome back.
Then I said, if Mark was here, he would say.
It was a seamless transition.
I mean, you would think this was some kind of commercial where I say we're in uncertain times and then my technology
and then it freezes.
Right. So I don't know where that left off, but I think the end of what I was going to get to is, as a firm, as a people leader, I think EY gave me some really good tools to work with. So we started by eliminating separations from the firm through the end of our fiscal year, honoring commitments to hires from campus, keeping our commitments to our interns. And so kind of places that we could shut down the uncertainty that we could control, we did that. And then it became my job as a leader to really localize that with my folks and my team. So how do I take that and amplify it to making sure we're giving one another the grace and the space to adjust to new norms, to take care of ourselves in every aspect, and to roll with that as it evolves? Because I made a point early on with my teams to note, as we're asking, how are you doing? Is everything good? Noting that we know this is a very fluid space. And so if I ask you today that you're good and tomorrow you're not, that's okay. But we got to talk about it. And Lindsey, to your point of kind of managing that balance of, well, I don't want to be on you every day to say, are you good? Is everything still great? But the moment that it changes, be willing to advocate for yourself. And I've been really proud of how our teams have rallied to give our folks that space and time that they've needed to really take care of what's going on in their life and find that right balance.
Yeah, it really does bring that common humanity to the surface in a way, as Lindsey said before, that we don't always experience in the office when we're live in those daily interactions with others. It's really fascinating. Thank you so much. I'm really glad you were able to rejoin.
Me too.
And you picked up right off. It was seamless. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Jen, maybe you'd like to jump into the space just to say what's been hard or what's been most challenging for you and how you've been able to work through that.
Yeah, I think it's trying to figure out the best way forward, and the people with the answers are those around us. I've found myself asking a lot more questions lately to gain insights from others, because being here by ourselves, I think has created a brand new challenge where we're not even commuting. We're not having the experience of just being in our communities and our routines. And so I've found myself being more deliberate and intentional. I know that word's been used a lot today already, about asking others for questions and advice and being vulnerable with my own sort of inquiry around how to get through every day in a way that is positive and productive and realistic. I think our model behavior, in addition to HR being expected to be, I like the analogy, Lindsey, the flight attendant, we absolutely have to be the voice of the organization that is what people are looking for. People are looking to us to provide advice and insights and information in a very concise and calm and thoughtful way. And so our modeled behavior right now for our teams and our colleagues and our internal clients is so critical. And one of the things I've tried to do is maintain the regular conversations I'm having, for example, with my direct reports around their development. So what do they see in the future? What are their aspirations? And continuing those conversations and talk about what external developmental goals do you have this year? How can I support that? It does create a sense of, okay, I think it's still moving forward, and having that momentum for them is really important. And I think it does hopefully inspire them to think about their own development, their own career. I won't say in spite of this, but maybe because of it. So how do we harness this opportunity in a positive way and figure out what we're really good at and use those strengths to our benefit and be truly leaders. And I love the quote that Wayne Gretzky said, skate to where the puck is going. And I, every day, am trying to think about that, skate to where the puck is going. And if I can do that, hopefully that inspires others to think forward as well.
Yeah, oh, I love that. That is a wonderful segue into our last question. And I'm going to throw a little bit of a twist into this. We would love a piece or two of advice that you would like to give people now as we look ahead. So I'm going to build on Jen's point about momentum and movement, which we all know is so important. And I think we're finally sensing that there is some of that. The 29th next week marks a transition, hopefully into the next phase. So given your role and all the experiences you've had, as you think ahead a little bit, what piece of advice or two would you give to people about how to navigate the next 90 days? Because those rules in some ways are going to be even less clear than the rules we've had over the last 90 days. And I think that's going to be as challenging, in some ways, if not more challenging for folks. So Lindsey, maybe we'll ask you to start us off on this one.
I've been thinking a lot about, it's very cheesy. I happened to watch Frozen 2 right before this all happened. And I don't know if anyone's seen it, but this just do the next right thing was like incredibly clarifying for me. Because I think it's, if there's ever been a time for mindfulness and in the moment living, it is all the time. And I've certainly been trying to cultivate that. But I would say there is no better test to that sort of intention than to live through a pandemic, because as I said, it's different to make a game plan based on known constraints, general sense of how things are going to play out. I said this a little bit earlier. It's like all of that was an illusion no matter what, but now it's especially hard to hold it up and act as if it is true. So I've just been thinking a lot about not putting the pressure on myself to know the 90 days, to know what I know and make peace with what I don't know. And again, be transparent about that. Again, setting people free to know that to be a leader does not mean you suddenly get that playbook. It doesn't like come to you in the mail or something. So I've been thinking a lot about that. And I think the other thing is to make it a positive intention. So especially for a business like ours that is not heavily resourced and we are still proving ourselves in many ways, it is about survival right now. But I would say no one does the most inspired work from a place of survival. I mean, it's certainly a motivating factor, but I don't think anyone feels they're, achieving anything sort of in the terms of up-leveling their game, if you will, by just getting through it. So we work with an executive coach who had asked me a question I keep thinking about, which is, what do you want to say that you've learned or how you've grown after all this is done? And it's been a really motivating question to ask myself. Okay, what do you want to say you did? What do you want to say you learned? How do you want to say you've grown? And it's helped bring me back to a place of feeling like I'm plodding forward beyond survival into really an opportunity, regardless of what plays out, to be better for it. And also just thinking about the muscles we're all building as we navigate it together. There's going to be no world where we can pretend to care about the petty things anymore, because we've lived through this. And so it'll be very difficult to look each other in the eye and play those games anymore. So I choose to see it as a really helpful, clarifying moment. And I think in the 90 days game, it's like, just do the next right thing. Like, it's, like I said, super cheesy, but it came to me at the right time. And it really provided like a very simple clarity to one thing and then the next and the next, and it will add up to what it's supposed to be.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's so helpful. And it's so amazing how when those phrases come along and they just fit in a space where we're really ready to hear them, they can have such a profound impact. And I love how something so simple resonated with you so deeply. It's really very powerful. Thank you so much. Okay, Jen, we'd love to hear your piece of advice or two about how you think through navigating the next phase of what we've been going through.
Yeah, I think, continue to innovate. I think for organizations and people, that's going to be really important. And what space has this created, to your point, for us to kind of move forward in a way that is creative, intentional, and new. Continue to build on, this notion of inquiry and finding a way to leverage one another, listen, seek certainly to understand, but also assume, think positively, but assume positive intent, because people are feeling a lot of different emotions in this, and they will feel new emotions in this next phase. I actually think this will be in some ways more difficult than the quick pivot to a remote workforce, because there are complications and all sorts of considerations globally. Each locale is very different and unique. And I would say, take care of yourself. Do the things that absolutely inspire you, and take that time, because I think that's one lesson I've learned, is to be more open-minded about the things that are important to me, to carve out time. I'm not saying I take, 3 hours of my day to do something, but certainly I think we need to start giving ourselves intervals of time to rest, to recharge, and to do the things that enrich our lives in very different ways, because then back to the innovation point, that's what creates the room in our brains to create and think about problems in a new and different way.
Yeah, absolutely. We all need the recovery time, and we often don't give it to ourselves. So maybe this experience has made us even more focused on the need to incorporate that into our daily and weekly routines. Wonderful. Thank you. Mark, what words of wisdom do you have for us as we think ahead?
I'll say that's hard to follow, including the immortal words of Princess Anna that we could all live
You're
by.
welcome.
So thanks for that, Lindsay. When you said it the first time, it was funny. I said I know that's from a movie, and we watched Frozen 2 during our time at home. So thanks for placing it for me. So my advice, I think, is going to come with a caveat, and similar to the flight attendant, I've used the pre-flight safety briefing thing more than I care to recognize about get your mask on and then help the others next to you. But take care of your needs and ask for help where you need it is the caveat. But the advice that I would say is when you're on that solid footing, and Lindsay, you also mentioned Maslow's hierarchy. So when you've got the needs thing down and you feel like you're good, my advice right now would be to be courageous. And this is advice that I've given to the HR executive community, but really it applies to anybody. What's about to come for our economy is a planned and phased physical return to work in some adjusted normal. And so that's going to bring a lot of must-dos relative to managing that. But while we're managing this physical return to a work environment, I would challenge everyone to really reimagine the work while you're doing that. I don't think we will ever have an opportunity in which change is tolerated quite like the one that we're in right now. And so a lot of this is going to be how do you use it? Go be bold. There's lots of things we've tried to do as an HR community around culture and purpose and employee experience. And the list is really, really long. Rip up the rules and rewrite them. Go be bold, go be courageous. That would be my advice.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
and I think especially for us in HR, we take diversity, equity, and inclusion really seriously at ShopRunner, and at the last few places I've been, it's a big part of my personal quest. And I think also there's no better opportunity to have a hard look at systems that we're not serving everyone, and certainly putting everyone on the equal footing of we're all at home is a start, because we can no longer deny the differences. So I also, like, to your point, Mark, I think, like, rip up the playbook, like, think about whether the system was designed well, if it serves everybody, and if it doesn't meet your needs anymore, like, what a better time to just build from the ashes, if you will, just like figure it out and build something even better. So that also has been something that personally for me, again, to the point of like moving forward with a positive intention, the opportunity we have to redesign those systems is so exciting to me. I just don't want us to blow it. I want us to remain courageous, but it's certainly difficult when day to day you're dealing with any number of roller coaster emotions, because you're living through it both as a leader and as a person and all those things. So I agree with you, Mark. I think the redesigning of systems specifically is a great opportunity for us as HR leaders to really have a hard look at some of those things and seize the day,
100%.
Yeah, and you've all mentioned that, even before the pandemic, there were things or behaviors or patterns that we had that weren't necessarily serving us well. Some people that I talk to, because I do a lot of coaching, some people never unplug. They were 24/7. They never got the recharge that, Jen, you were talking about. So we need to look at some of those things, knowing that they weren't necessarily patterns that were serving us, as well as some of the new ones have. And there have been some incredibly positive things I've heard people talk about from this experience too. So I think, Jen, back to something you said, will we take the learning? Can we really figure out what we're able to click and carry with us into the next phase that served us well and now might serve us even better as we look to the future? So wonderful points. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the baton at this point back to Anthony.
Thank you. Yes, and I'll just echo Kathy's thoughts. The dialogue today has just been so incredible. And, even for us, this is the now 8th episode. To hear the tone of our leaders become more prospective and more energetic about kind of moving through this and even starting to innovate through it is just so inspiring. And it shows the resiliency of all of you as leaders. So thank you so much for stepping into the discussion. We do have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask, and it looks like all of them are for anybody on the panel. The first comes from our Zoom webinar room. I'm curious to hear any new or creative ways you've invested in developing people differently in this time. Have you accelerated or prioritized development investments to take advantage of these unusual times? And I know, Jen, you had commented on this earlier. I think the question here is there any new ways that you all are investing in developing your people? And this is open for anybody.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done, because this is something that is new to us that we have to develop, is kind of leading through this time. And so our organization did something really cool. Our learning and development team, in partnership with the CEO and the CHRO, facilitated a 30-minute session. There were multiple 30-minute sessions that we had, where we heard from leaders in the organization, throughout the organization, who lead different size teams. And it was really an opportunity for them to share their ideas. And so bringing everyone together from a leadership perspective to listen to one another and learn creates more of almost a community of practice around living and working and being effective in this new context. And I really liked that series. It was really well received. We got a lot of great feedback, and that has been something, just one recent example of a new way. And obviously it was remote and it was live, and it was very interactive. It was really cool. And I think we're going to have to think more about, okay, how do we enable our leaders now in a different way as we continue on this journey. And some of it is because my playbook did not come in the mail, Lindsay, just so you know, I didn't get mine either. Some of this is going to be our creativity and observation and really challenging each other and taking information as we get it around some of the new trends, and then formulating development around that. And so that was one example that I just would like to share, because I thought it was so incredible, and it was done really quickly, and it was done in an extraordinarily effective manner.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Mark or Lindsay, anything to add?
Well, there's maybe two small things I'd throw in. Well, first, I think Lindsay guaranteed us that playbook would be there in 2 days. It never showed up.
I'm working on it. It's a good
10 weeks in.
It's incredibly
10 weeks in,
complicated.
clock's ticking.
Yeah.
I think we looked at things through a number of lenses and a couple of examples. We quickly launched for our folks internally a series called Inclusive Leadership in Times of Crisis. And so kind of marrying some of the fast learnings around crisis mode and prep and execution mode with some of the things that we already knew as norms around inclusive leadership. And so how was that evolving in real time, and really getting that in the hands of our folks. And so a little bit of real time, how are we prepping our folks to succeed during this time? But also, I think bigger picture, the business tries to march on. And so I'll be recording videos tomorrow for what usually is a 3-day, 3,500 person in-person training event that we do every year for my group. So 3,500 of my closest friends in my part of the business, we get together in a spot, and it is just a nonstop sun up to sundown learn-a-thon. And it's fully virtual this year. And so that will be a really big task and challenge for us to be able to pull that off in an engaging way. And so I get thankful to be able to be a part of that on the facilitating side. And I'm going to spend my part of my day off tomorrow filming some video for that. So I'll report back to the group how our big 3,500 person 3-day virtual learn-a-thon goes this year. But I have high hopes.
I love that idea.
And I think my perspective is just different, just because of the stage of company and the amount of resources available. But we've gotten really creative about deploying knowledge internally, so ways to show up for one another. Another great example is, LinkedIn. We had an investment with them tied to filling positions. We're not going to be doing that. We went on a hiring freeze. We've now reallocated those dollars toward LinkedIn Learning to really provide more engagement to the people at home, and that was through a great partnership with LinkedIn. And I've had a great relationship with them over the years, and they totally get what's happening, and we're not unique in this regard. So that's been a way to sort of reallocate and make changes in real time. But the other part has just been, we have someone who runs the one of our products, and she's a certified yoga instructor. And so now we do every Thursday since this started, we do a yoga and meditation. I lead the meditation, she does the yoga, and it's been this amazing way to, it is crisis management. It's basically us training each other in how to regulate ourselves and connect and, sort of dispel expectations. And it's something that wouldn't have happened without the pandemic, I'm sorry to say. But we are totally leaning into it as this really amazing way. And she and I now can talk more. So I think also just we have been thinking more about what knowledge already exists in our organization that we could package and find a way to offer it to people, because they want to be of service. They want to share that, and we will not have more resources to allocate in the near term. So then what can we do? Because we don't want to act as if this curious, hungry workforce of ours suddenly becomes less curious and less hungry for information. So we're trying to get creative about different ways to do that and bring offerings to the table.
Yeah, and as a learning professional myself, I can certainly appreciate the behaviors of our learners are shifting so drastically now that they are in place and at home, and those that maybe required a bit of the face-to-face are now being challenged to do, their learning and development in more of a self-directed way. So it's going to be really interesting to see those behaviors either stay or evolve over the course of the next couple of years. We appreciate your thoughts on that question. I think we have time for one more quick one, and this comes from our LinkedIn community. It's a simple one. Where are you asking your folks to level up? So maybe the question is, are there any unique areas that you're asking your folks to really level up and to step up? And this could be for anyone.
I think for us, again, it's the nature of our stage company. There are positions where we will not backfill if someone decides to exit. And that, again, it's the best thing for the business. We are interested in preserving all of the jobs. We have decided that that was our number one tenet as we navigated all of this, was to ensure people had the roles that they were in. But I think there's no mistaking that when we do that, it means there will be opportunity for people to step up or level up. And again, it might not just be one person that's already on the team. It might be, hey, I can jump in and help you there. The other thing we've tried to do is really right size our ambition relative to what we believe will be possible because of all of these dynamics. And so it, again, was something that we would have done anyway, but this certainly provided a new lens to really be honest with ourselves about what we felt was possible, what we felt was important, and that we owed our people those priorities, especially now in light of all of the ways that the dynamics have changed. So the up-leveling comes, yes, as a result of the constraints that exist, but we also paired that with a clarity of vision and a clarity of scope that, we're not going to close our ears and pretend it's not happening. It's not that. And so now how do we navigate nimbly together? And so it's with those two things. So there's no doubting we're all stepping up in new ways. Like I said, Renee's doing yoga and she's doing it because she knows it's helpful to people. It's one example, but there are lots of ways where people are showing up there. And again, it's because we're really mission driven. We're excited about what we're building and hopeful that these are muscles people will use no matter where they go in their careers from here on out. And, hopefully we'll build something amazing in the meantime.
Yeah, I think one that I would add is, while a lot of our conversation today amongst the whole panel has been about authentic leadership and care for one another and grace and those kinds of things, we're also trying to really have folks level up relative to their own self-advocacy. Making that time for yourself, making sure. Somebody said something to me the other day that it really hit home on just how jarring this environment can be. They said, I've lost track of whether I'm working from home or sleeping at work. And so it stopped and made me, after I laughed, it made me think what they really mean is that they don't have the intentionality of being able to separate them like they usually do. And hopefully the environment helps us build some of those muscles so that as we revert back to something that looked like what we previously knew as normal, that we continue advocating for those needs. Because Lindsey, I couldn't agree with you more. We can't ask our people to do inspired work if they're really just fighting by and surviving. We have to get them to really to a much better place, and I think self-advocacy can get them there.
And I totally agree. I was going to say, I think where I see this, I believe everyone is a leader. And so does this open the door for everyone to, in their own way, lead? And I think that's kind of what you're both talking about, is how do we encourage and inspire others to help lead through this using, and that is in and of itself leveling up, because then it also gives us a window into, who is going to step up, act with courage. That's certainly a critical word right now. But it doesn't necessarily have to be in the context of their job or their role. I think it is about what they bring to the table and how we support those ideas and really cultivate a new way of thinking about how our people contribute. And I think that could, have real impact around business results, certainly growth, and then how we get into this next phase of this ever evolving situation.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you all so much for your contributions. I'll tell you, I feel like we could sit on the panel here or at the table for another hour or two. You all have just provided such unique insight, and we really, really appreciate your time today. I want to also thank our community, those folks who have joined the Zoom room, as well as our LinkedIn and Facebook community. We also want to thank you for your very thoughtful questions. Before we wrap it up, I would like to share that next week we continue our virtual roundtable series with episode 8. We're going to be focused on the new virtual first learning organizations. So as organizations come out of the at-home policy, how have their learning cultures been shaped by the new age behaviors and learning programs that have been in place to support their employees? We have a group of leaders, learning leaders from across different industries who have had to make some quick adjustments in supporting the learning and development of their people. You can join us next Thursday at 3 o'clock. In fact, every Thursday at 3 o'clock, we will be here at the virtual roundtable, and we will also be broadcasting live on LinkedIn. You can find all information about future episodes. You can also view previous episodes and today's episode at thoughtium.com/live. So again, thank you so much to our community who are joining us today. And finally, I want to give a very special thank you to Lindsey, Mark, and Jen. Thank you for your time. Thank you for really stepping into the discussion, and moreover, your authenticity in sharing your thoughts and your experiences. Thank you all so much for joining. We will see you all next week, hopefully Thursday at 3 o'clock. And we hope you all have a great rest of the week. So long.